before and after this retreat, the stuff that's happening in our world, in our communities in the United States. We have Alton Sterling was killed by police in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, 5th of July, a day later. Rolando Castillo was shot and killed during a traffic stop outside Minneapolis, Minnesota. 5 Dallas police officers were killed over the weekend, over that weekend retreat. On Thursday night, over 80 died in southern France. As a truck plowed through a crowd. We saw a power struggle in Turkey. Lord have mercy. We live in a world ripping itself apart when we ask where God is, why God doesn't do anything to combat the evil. We have to look at ourselves. We look at ourselves because in us is the very prejudice, rage, thirst for power that we see amplified in these stories and these events. We look at ourselves not only because we see the same sin at power within us, but we look at ourselves because we're called by God to be part of the solution. A people of grace, a people of mercy, a people that shows the world a different way. But what does that different way look like? What should we be doing? What should we look like? What is our task? Today's story doesn't restrict such a calling in sort of a one-size-fits-all, but we receive a portrait of two sisters with vastly different ways of knowing Jesus. Have you ever really, you met someone and had a horrible first impression of that person? Oh, I see an elbow. Okay. Had a horrible first impression of someone, but then once you got to know them, became like your best friend. Anyone like that? Just could not stand? Probably, yeah. The first impression sometimes can impact us, and I'm afraid that today, as we look at Mary and Martha, Martha has had a horrible first impression that has lasted for centuries. And I hope today to see Martha in a bit of a different light. She has been thrown under many, many buses throughout the years. And so I'm hoping that today we can see Martha's side of the story. We can kind of unpack. We've got a lot of work to do, but to see Martha in a new light, maybe even befriend her, to see that she is an amazing person, someone not to be criticized, but to follow even. So let's pray. Lord, help us to see your truth through Jesus Christ, who is the truth. Amen. We have a lot of work ahead of us today. These 5 verses, as I mentioned, are really, really misunderstood. I mean, I didn't know how badly I misunderstood this passage until about 2 weeks ago. I was on a blog, and someone was writing about this, a woman named Mary Stromer Hansen. And as she was writing about this passage, she really opened my eyes to this passage, and I saw that she had written her dissertation and then a book based on this. And the book's subtitle is, and I'm not joking, it says, "Do not preach Mary and Martha again until you read this." And so then I saw that this passage was coming up in the lectionary, and I'm like, I got to get this lady's book. And there wasn't much time to get this lady's book. It wasn't on Kindle or anything, but thankfully Google Books had it, and so I bought it. And I'm thankful that I got to read her book before. But here's how we normally read the passage, or how I should say I normally read the passage. We read 2 weeks ago that Jesus sends out the 70 and 35 pairs of people to go ahead of him. The time he's setting his face towards Jerusalem, there's not much time left. So he sends out these pairs to all of these villages to go preach the kingdom so that they're ready to receive Jesus. If they receive the disciples, that is, right? If the disciples aren't received, they're supposed to shake the dust off their feet and leave. He says, go find a house, and if that house, and you say, peace be on this house, and if that house accepts your peace, stay there. And the peace of God will remain in that house. It's a beautiful, beautiful picture of hospitality. We'll get back to that. So we have the story of Jesus coming to Martha's house, and we'll get to that part, but the 70 maybe are coming to the house, and Martha is so busy trying to prepare everything that needs to be prepared for these 70 guests, perhaps. And she's busy in the kitchen, and she comes out and she sees Mary sitting at the feet of Jesus, and she's frustrated. And she says, "Is Jesus, I know she might not listen to me, but maybe she'll listen to you. Tell her to help me in the kitchen." And then Jesus kind of turns to Martha and says, no, this Mary has chosen what is better, and it will not be taken from her. Ouch. Basically, the message that we normally hear this is Martha's bad. Martha is wrong. The practical tasks that must be accomplished are not on the same level as listening at the feet of Jesus. Does that sound familiar? Is that how you've normally heard this story read? I mean, Martin Luther paraphrased it in this way. Martha, your work must be punished and regardless as worthless. I want no work but that of Mary, which is faith. Okay, the whole works versus faith thing, which Martin Luther and the reformers were trying to battle against. But what if this story is about something totally different? So a few years ago, I heard a different kind of take on this story from Ken Bailey. And the idea is a little bit more creative. It's more about gendered norms, that Martha is concerned because Mary is sitting at the feet of Jesus, and Mary as a woman shouldn't take the posture of a disciple. Sitting at the feet of a teacher means you are a disciple. And so Mary shouldn't be doing that. She should know her place. She should go get back to the kitchen. And Jesus said, no, it's okay. It's better to be a disciple than to continue these gender norms of your kitchen. And that's a bit more creative, but it still throws Martha under the bus of saying the practical things you're doing, the service you're doing in the kitchen doesn't matter. But I mean, Jesus allowed all. I mean, he teaches the Samaritan woman. In the crowds, he doesn't say, women, turn off your hearing and leave me. He taught all. He allowed all to follow. There were the disciples, the 12 who were men, but they had other disciples that were women as well. But didn't Jesus, just 2 weeks ago, as we saw, send out the 70 with the command to go into those homes and say, peace be. If someone offers you hospitality, the peace of God will rest on that house. So how can Jesus, just a few verses later, then reprimand Martha for extending him hospitality? That's not right either, Jesus. What's up with that? Why isn't Jesus speaking that peace to Martha in her home? Yesterday there was a wedding here, and man, let me tell you, the Marthas are important. The Marthas are important. The amount of people that were putting things together. The Marthas we didn't even see because last night we left and all these tables had to be back up. I'm like, should we start doing this? And a Martha named Gilbert will come back. So, hopefully with some other people, I don't know, and put all of these things back up. I was just in the kitchen earlier today, and if any of you know Ted, our deacon Ted, he always makes coffee. He always makes sure that I know when the coffee's ready on a Sunday morning. But one of the women in the kitchen said, there's not many like him. He's rare. He serves God in a different way. He's Martha as well. And of course, there are many, many women that serve in the kitchen as well that have this heart. Now, this text isn't easy. And throughout the centuries, people have wrestled with exactly the point of what this is. And so, we have different manuscripts. I don't know if you know this, but we don't have the original copy of what Luke wrote. We don't have this pristine, laminated copy of the parchment which Luke wrote. What we have is the copies of copies of copies, right? Didn't have a Xerox, right? Someone had to sit down with Luke's copy and say, we want a copy of the Gospel of Luke, in Corinth, and we want it over, in the cities in Galatia and everything. So they would copy it. But sometimes as they copied it, they'd make mistakes, or sometimes as they copied it, they'd write a little note because they were a little bit confused. So it says really that Martha received Jesus. We have manuscripts that say simply, Martha received Jesus. And then we have some manuscripts that say, in her home. That, someone probably was writing down and wrote as a note to themselves in their own copy, in her home, just because it was a little bit confusing. What does it mean? She received him without that object. But it could mean that she just received him, she accepted him, she took Jesus in as who he is, as Messiah, as Christ. That she accepted as a disciple all that Jesus said he was. But because of some of the manuscripts that say into her home, this is why we think Martha's in the kitchen. If we take that out, it changes. The scene changes. Maybe there's no house at all. Maybe there's no kitchen. Maybe Martha is just having this meeting in her hometown with Jesus, and she receives Jesus, and she's talking with him. It changes quite a bit. Because, Martha is no theological slouch at all. If you read the story in John 11 and 12, this is where Mary and Martha had a brother, Lazarus. Lazarus is really sick. And so Mary and Martha say, we know where Jesus is. Send a letter because we know if we get it to Jesus, he can come in time to heal our brother. So they do so. But what does Jesus do? He dilly-dallies. He takes his time. He says, this will surely not end in his death, but it does. But Lazarus dies. And so in John 11 and 12, when Jesus comes, and Martha is the one that meets Jesus, and she confronts Jesus and says, if you were here, if you were present, we sent the letter with plenty of time, and you took your time. If you would have come here, my brother would not have died. And Jesus says, your brother will rise again. What is Martha's response? She says, I believe that he will be raised in the last days. I believe he'll be resurrected. And she knows her stuff. And Jesus says, wait, no, I am the resurrection and the life. This is the last of the famous I am passages in John. And he reveals that, and he says, do you believe this? And Martha says, I believe you're the Messiah, you're the Christ. In the other Gospels, we have Peter confessing this glorious climax of, you are the Messiah, you're the Christ. We were just reading this in Bible study, right? Peter's confession of Christ. And John, it's Martha that's doing it. It shifts. So Martha is not just, she hasn't just been in the kitchen never listening to Jesus, is my point. She knows her stuff. And so, but these sisters are so different because Jesus has this theological debate all the while the brother's dead there. And then he goes and he sees Mary. And what does Mary do? Mary's just crying. Does Jesus have a theological debate with Mary? No. Jesus then says, I just weeps for her. There are no words. You're weeping, I will weep with her. So my whole point is that Martha is probably just as much a disciple, just as much as one who sits at the feet of Jesus as Mary is. It's not just that Mary is sitting at the feet of Jesus. Martha has sat at the feet of Jesus. I believe that as Jesus says, Martha, Martha, you're concerned with much diakonia. That's where we get the word deacon from. Your service, your ministry. You're concerned with much ministry. I think what he's saying is she has been left behind. Mary is maybe one of the 70 who was sent elsewhere. And Martha's back home, and there's a lot to be done at home. There's that family that needs prayer, there's that marriage that's in trouble, that other person's sick and we have this Bible study over here, we have all this stuff. We have too much work here, Jesus. And Mary left me, and you know that women aren't supposed to travel, Jesus. You know women are supposed to keep their honor by staying in the hometown where we can protect them and everything. And she's off doing God knows what. Tell her to come back because there's plenty of work here, Jesus. And Jesus says, no. Mary has chosen well. We translate that better sometimes, but it could just be she has chosen good. She has chosen well. Not that Jesus is saying she has chosen better than you. She has chosen differently. The pastor in Gaithersburg Presbyterian, he came here, Ted Wright, and he talked to us about apostles versus elders. He was teaching our session about what an elder does. And an elder is the one who stays behind, who is established as a church, who's there for the long term, guiding and protecting the church. Paul was not an elder. Paul was not a pastor. Paul was an apostle. He would just go to a new place for a couple of weeks, speak the gospel, hopefully people would respond. He'd establish elders there, and he'd be off. It wasn't his place to stay and do that. Peter, on the other hand, is an elder, so when we read 1 Peter says, as a fellow elder, I appeal to you. There are different kinds of ministry, and we need both. We need those that go somewhere else, and we need those that stay behind. Jesus' response isn't to throw Martha under the bus. It isn't to say that Mary has chosen better. It's to say that Mary has chosen well. I know, during my previous trip to Illinois, just at the end of June, I was fishing with my brother on a boat. It was wonderful. And he turned to me and he said, "So how long do you think this Maryland thing is going to go?" Kind of saying, you should come back home. You should come back to Illinois. And it kind of shocked me because I was like, no, I don't think you get it. Like, I feel God's calling me here. And of course, it's, as long as God is calling me here, and as long as the church doesn't kick me out, or the presbytery doesn't kick me out, or anything, I'm here. I'm here in Maryland. It's a call of God. I think it's a good call. It's a different call than yours. You have remained behind. And even going through my parents' hometown, there's a lot of need. There's a lot I see, and my heart, cries out to that and says, "Yeah, Rockford needs help." My dad, when I told my dad I wanted to go overseas, and I started in the Philippines for a little bit, and then to Taiwan. And my dad was always confused about that as well. Why do you have to go all that way? Why do you need to buy a plane ticket? There's need right here. Yes, Martha. My dad named Martha. There is need, but there's need everywhere. So how do we know? It's not that one is better than the other. They're both good. But just release me and be able to see what I'm doing is good. To choose well is to choose service to Jesus, and both sisters have chosen that. You hear his concern. He says, Martha, Martha, 2 times. Martha, you have a lot on your mind. You're busy. You're busy leading these people in your hometown, but I'm here. Look at me. You're concerned. Your mind is on your sister, and I, Jesus, am here in your hometown. Fellowship with me. Commune with me now. She's chosen well. Leave her and trust God in her hands. Meet with me. Be faithful to your own calling. That is all that is needed. The woman who wrote this book, she has her own translation. I'll read it and see if it clarifies this passage a little bit more. As they were on their way, he came to a village. It switches to the singular. Jesus came to a village where a woman named Martha received him. She had a sister called Mary, who also was one who sat at the Lord's feet, always listening to his words. But Martha was constantly torn apart concerning much ministry. She suddenly approached him and said, Lord, do you not care that my sister regularly leaves me to minister alone? Tell her, therefore, that she may give me a hand. But the Lord answered her, saying, Martha, Martha, you're anxious and agitated concerning much, but only one thing is needed. For Mary has chosen good, that it will not be taken from her. A lot of times in ministry we look and we are blessed by having people that are very talented, that can sing. A woman in the Philippines. She is an amazing pastor, amazing preacher. But in the Philippines, being able to sing is like a huge thing. And everybody wants to be able to sing. And she was so set, I'm going to sing on Sundays. And the missionary had to just say, no, this is not your calling. You are called, but you're not called to do that. And that's okay. When we look around, sometimes we say, man, I'm busy meeting people, talking with people, praying. Why don't they stop playing guitar and help me? Why doesn't Pastor Eric stop studying so much to preach on Sunday morning and do this? We look at each other and we complain and say, why don't they do ministry in the way I do? Why don't they function in the way I do? What Jesus says is look to him. Find strength in serving him and all the capabilities he has given you. It will look different, and don't judge another by what your service looks like. Don't force people into your mold. But both the spiritual and the practical both emotional leaders and us theological nerds, we all must follow Jesus in our own way. And Jesus meets us there in all of our distinction, in all of our difference. Let us pray. Lord, we thank you that Martha's all right. It's all right to serve back home. It's all right to stay close. It's all right to even serve in the kitchen. It's all right to serve practically and to make bulletins and send out announcements. Those things are just as spiritual. Help us, Lord, to find our callings and not judge one another, but Lord, may we seek you. May we not be worried by so many things that we miss you. Martha was missing you right in front of her because she was worried and overwhelmed by the ministry. Lord, help us to see you and to notice you around